The stories we are being told in your presentations show diversity of realities, accomplishments, and challenges. I want to put the first question, and then please bring your questions. When you're thinking of the design of new tools and services for research and knowledge communication and use, what makes them inclusive for local voices addressing local needs with different cultures, different values? This is the question.
Okay, is that on? No, yeah. Well, we have been answering demands from the biological community, basically. And although we do have some demands from users, but most users are also scholars. They're the people that are involved with biodiversity, either botanists and zoologists and so on, but they do have a scholarly background. So our tools are normally implemented for that community only. Very little is done with a community that asks, like I get school kids that send me emails and things like that. Then it's just an email, then it's just an information, but not tools. So we're attending the academic community, really.
For me, I think what's important is to, and this is again, I didn't plan this out with Cassidy, but she's saying a lot of the things that I wanted to echo is this baking in the values that we want into the tools and systems that we need. I think this is one of the things that in Latin America, the fact that these platforms like Cielo and Red Lake are planned out as they have built into their structures of how they're funded, of how they're organized to be open, being collaborative, right? And the fact that they've sort of have structured themselves around with public funding, structured themselves around being inclusive and having cooperation and having sort of networks of people that participate in them. This is how you get tools and how you build a whole system across an entire region that believes and shares in those values. I think you have to bake them in to how you do these things. This is why cooperative approaches to trying to do open access, for example, I think will work much better than approaches that try to approach these things for trying to figure out what's the right sort of commercial business model.
I think for us, we probably have a much different sense of what tools might mean to our research project. It could range for, tools that facilitate research communications would be a 4x4 to get across the desert. We actually struggle to have adequate transportation to bring everybody together. So that's a big struggle for us. And then also, I think with the research communications, we found that these researcher contracts across all of our parties, Natural Justice, Cape Town, Indiana, each community has enabled us to have this structure to boost the communication among us, to really force us to say what are the assumptions, what are the expectations, what are the moments of sharing and non-sharing, and actually having that, albeit limited legal tool, has actually forced us to really think deeply about how we're supposed to communicate and what the expectations are going forward. And so we're working on that as a potential model for other different research practices. So that's been actually kind of exciting to sort of see that develop. And I'd have to say, that's been going on for a year. Imagine trying to negotiate a contract that in depth between multiple parties. It takes a long time. So.
If you have questions for the panelists, please raise your hand. Thank you, Nicole, for your help. Thank you very much.
Oh.
The presentations were quite interesting because I'm from Africa, and just like the first speaker spoken, we were quite behind the Western people. But especially the Brazil is considered to be one of the hot biodiversities in the world. And most especially for identification of the plants, there are species similarities and variations. So I would want to ask two questions. For example, the herbarium that does that identification, what do you do about the plant species that are rare, threatened, and extinct? What do you do about those plant species? Then secondly, I've been seeing that the identification is quite difficult, most especially for those that don't have expertise. Have you developed a software that could help you in identifying some of these plant species?
Sorry, I didn't really understand. The first question?
The first question. I've said that, for example, Latin America is one of the host biodiversities in the world.
Yes,
yes. Most especially Brazil. Then the question, some plants are rare, extinct. And in fact, for some of these plants, how do you do about bringing them, especially preserving, maybe identifying some of those rare plants? That's the first question.
Okay, let me answer one at a time. Rare plants.
Yes, rare plants.
Okay, what we did is each herbarium has their own data policy. Okay, because for rare and endangered plants, some people believe that you cannot put geographic information online and make it available, that people can go there and pick up the plant and finish it. Other people believe that you have to do that because then there's social control.
Okay.
So there's no right or wrong answer. And we went into a whole year debate because of that. So then we decided, no, the best way is for each data provider who holds the information, who holds the knowledge, to be able to decide whether that data can be made publicly available or not. So what data is sent to the network, that's open data. So whatever has to be, and there are tools to help herbarian click on everything that they don't want to send to the data so that that can be automatic.
Okay. Then is there any software that helps you in identification of similar plants, those plants that have similarity?
Identification of similar plants?
Yes. Is there any software? Is there any software?
Software.
Yes.
There are keys for identification, but in terms of the information system, what we did systems that can compare images.
Okay.
You can zoom in, you can measure, you can look at detail. So that's cyber taxonomy, that's helped. And another thing, not one collection alone can hold all taxonomists of the groups they have within their data, within their herbarium or zoological collections. So we allow an annotation system. So who's ever searching the system and looks at a certain record and does not agree with that determination, they can write their comments. This comment is sent to the curator and is published together with that record, with his name and everything. That way, if there's a change of identification and there's a fight about it, both names are going to be there on that record. That's the only way we could help.
So, okay, my last question to the middleman.
Yes.
Then most of the journals from that region of the world are open access. Then don't you think that can affect the quality of the production?
Yes.
Sorry, if I understood that, if they think that the quality of the production of the journals is gone. I think that what it's done in Latin America is that over time, the only real debate that happened around open access, I think, that I detected a lot when I started going around and meeting with journal editors all across Latin America, was a question about doubting whether having things open access and putting things online was going to make them lower quality. And I think that what ended up happening as now that debate has sort of been resolved is that people have realized that the problem of the quality of the work is independent of where it is available. And if anything, putting things online has sort of brought about the issue of quality and made it an issue that needs to be talked about and resolved, because now we have visibility of the research. And as soon as the research is available and accessible, then people have felt that we need to also do something about quality. So if anything, I think that although it was the fear that it was going to lower the quality. I think the outcome has been that the quality of the work has gone up because countries were now starting, and institutions were now starting to feel pressure to make sure, oh, well, if we're putting this online, we need to invest in also improving the quality of the work.
And who bears the largest funding stress?
Sorry. We have only 3 more minutes,
Okay.
and we saw other hands raised. Thank you so much. But then you can share your ideas with the panelists. Thank you so much. Please.
I have a question actually to Laura, but maybe I can reframe it in a way that was inspired by the discussion we just had. So you just said that there are people who believe that it's best to expose that location of those rare species, whereas there are other people who believe that it's best not to expose that. And in a way, you, Laura, had a similar statement, like right now, as we're becoming more conscious of diversity issues, we are now kind of expecting everyone to do things openly. And there is a similar debate there. There are people who believe that this is actually bad for the developing world. And on the other hand, we have people who believe that's actually a big opportunity for the developing world because they can now share in all the resources from the rich as well. And I'm wondering whether you're aware of anyone peeking a little, or drilling a little deeper into those kinds of issues. Because I see lots of those beliefs being expressed, but we're scientists here, so someone's got to drill.
I could make a plug for my own book manuscript that hopefully will be out in the next year.
You should share the draft now.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're thinking through questions of post-colonial, what I consider post-colonial technoscience, it's precisely those contradictory tendencies and paradoxes that we find in the making of science within these post-colonial conditions, and they're struggling with precisely these questions, and that's what I'm interested. I'm interested in those tensions, and that's why I think that we need these different kind of models to help us untangle those tensions. So I think you actually said it best in your question. I mean, those paradoxes are really real.
I would just like to add something. When you talk about open science between the academics, it's been open for centuries. Not the way we're talking about open access. So between peers to those closed communities, and the big change with the internet was suddenly you're opening to anybody, and that's the big fear people have. And I really believe it's a process. And the idea of what is really should be open, what shouldn't be, it's just going to be a process that's going to be, in my view, opening throughout time. But it's a process. That's why you can't today say, okay, this has to be open, this can't be open. That's the way I used to act in the beginning. Either it's open or you're out. And it doesn't work. It has to be a process. People have to get used to the idea and have to believe that they profit from the idea. And in the long run, everything I've seen, they do. They get more acknowledgement, they get more funded, everything. They get more visibility.
We have time for one more question. Yes, please. I'm sorry, Nicole. I'm so sorry. This is collaboration. The last question.
Thank you. That was a really fantastic session. And just in passing, it did remind me of being at a museum and digital arts humanities conference, and the issue of access to objects, Indigenous objects in museums is a really complex situation. I was just wondering, Juan, with your research on access to open access in Latin America, whether you'd also looked at the repository, or whether you're considering looking at the repository network and sort of more of a diversity of resources, sort of outside of journal articles that might be taken up more.
Yeah, I've submitted a grant. I'll hear back in June about, because I want to look at, so if there's doctoral students here that are looking for a project, hopefully in June. But the idea is I want to repeat this kind of study that I did on these two portals, actually across across different countries, different journals, and different objects. So this, as soon as, this methodology of just doing a pop-up on someone that is accessing a work is something that's really sort of straightforward to do and implement on any web available resource. And so the idea is to try to sort of replicate this across different kinds of just different kinds of objects or different kinds of pages or just across countries, different models of access, right, to see how these things vary.
Let's talk.
So we thank you all very much, and thank you to the panelists.